We welcome you to another Sunday School lesson. Sunday School is a blessing and gift from God. God planned to make for himself a great nation, a people that are his own, and he chose to begin it with Abram. Our lesson records this moment. Possibly without warning, the Lord speaks to Abram. He gives one command and an avalanche of promises. The command was for Abram to go away from his country, the idolatrous city of Ur at the Chaldees, his people, and his father's house. The promises must have been way beyond anything Abram ever imagined for his life. At 75, Abram was middle-aged for his day, comfortably wealthy, and married to an exceptionally beautiful woman named Sarai, though they were childless. Then he was called, responded, and is now in Haran, Canaan, where our lesson takes place. Our first verse says, "The Lord had said to Abram, Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you." God's first word to Abram is go. Abram is given a two-sided instruction, both to go from, and to go to. God calls Abram to leave behind three things: his idolatrous country, his extended family or people group, and his father's household. He was to go to an unnamed land which God will show to him. Knowing nothing about God's full intentions, Abram believed God and left all behind. Faith is obedience even in the face of the unknown. In Abram it involves both separation and sacrifice. He is being called to leave his pagan culture in order to commit himself to the Lord. Verse 2 says, "I will make you into a great nation and I will bless you, I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing." God begins a series of promises to Abram. God vows to make Abram, through his descendants, a great nation. Although Israel achieved greatness during the reigns of David and Solomon, biblical prophecy indicates that Israel will be even greater during Christ's millennial reign. God will bless Abram personally, both materially and spiritually. Isaac's miraculous birth occurred when Abram was 100 and Sarai was 90. God will make Abram's name great. Even today, Abraham's name is revered because God said so. God will make Abram a blessing. Abram would be an avenue through which God's blessing would flow to others. These promises are the things anyone would have longed for themselves. When God calls us to do something, He blesses our obedience. And God doesn't choose people for His plans the way we do. Verse 3 says, "I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you I will curse, and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you." God continues His promises. God will bless those who bless Abram. Nations, who showed kindness to Abram, would reap kindness. God will curse those who dishonor Abram. Anyone who mistreated Abram would also be mistreated. In Abram, God will bless all the families, or peoples, of the earth. God would bless the whole world through an elderly childless couple. From them came the nation of Israel, and from Israel came the Savior. Notice though, that the only condition for receiving these promises seems to be that Abram goes. God's promises here are not dependent on Abram's actions, or obedience, or goodness, or worthiness. God simply says He will do these things to and through Abram. Of course, Abram currently has no way of knowing that for sure. Instead, he will have to trust God to keep his vows. Verse 4 says, "So Abram went, as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him." Abram was 75 years old when he set out from Haran. At the age of 75, Abram leaves his country, his people, and his home, and heads toward whatever God has in store for him. Abram began his journey from Haran, traveled in a southeasterly direction, and headed toward and through Canaan, the promised land. He trusts God, which is the essence of the Bible's depiction of faith. The willingness of Abram to serve God despite his age reminds us that God can and does work mightily through the lives of even older people. The person who yields to God's will can serve him at any age. Verse 5 says, he took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, all the possessions they had accumulated, and the people they had acquired in Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan, and they arrived there. This verse shows us what a wealthy man Abram was. He and Sarai had possessions and servants acquired during their prosperous time in Haran. They took these with them to the Canaan. They traveled in a large caravan which included herds of cattle and flocks of sheep, and headed to the land of Canaan until they reached it. Abram also brought along his late brother's son Lot. The two had apparently become close. Lot had no living father, and Abram had no children. Their relationship will play a significant role later on. Verse 7 says, the Lord appeared to Abram and said, to your offspring I will give this land. So he built an altar there to the Lord, who had appeared to him. Knowing that Abram needed some encouragement once he discovered that the land of Canaan was already occupied by Canaanites, the Lord appeared to Abram. The Lord assured Abram that although he was now in a land that others possessed, in a future day his descendants would dwell there. Undoubtedly Abram knew that the natives in Canaan would resist any attempt by his descendants to take their land. However, he believed God, and responded to the Lord's appearance by building an altar in preparation for worship there at the plain of Moreh. Chapters 12 to 14 are not part of our printed text. However, we are told that there was a famine in the land, so Abram went down to Egypt to live. God had to intervene as a result of a lie Abram told Pharaoh about Sarai. He and his family left Egypt and returned to Bethel in Canaan. There arose strife between Abram's and Lot's herdsmen that caused the two men and their families to separate in order to keep the peace. Chapter 14 deals with the war that broke out when Lot and his family were captured by 4 kings, and were later saved by Abram. To show his gratitude to God for his victory over the 4 kings, Abram gave a tenth of the spoils to a priest named Melchizedek. The second part of our lesson comes from chapter 15. The first verse says, after this, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision, do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your very great reward. Sometime after the dramatic events, the Lord spoke to Abram in a vision. Abram did have questions about how God would keep the promises he had made. God addresses Abram's emotions. It is safe to set aside your fear. I will serve as your shield, your protection against harm. The reward will be worth the wait. Abram is not necessarily questioning God's ability, but he is asking God for more details on how God plans to accomplish his purposes. Therefore, God calmed his troubled mind by promising him protection and provision. Verse 2 says, but Abram said, Sovereign Lord, what can you give me since I remain childless and the one who will inherit my estate is Eliezer of Damascus? Adam told God his current heir is a servant, not a son. He boldly, but respectfully says to the Lord, what will you give me? Though it sounds like a complaint, Abram's question is built on his faith in God's power and promises. Abram believes God, but he cannot yet see a path to the things God has promised. Instead of ceasing to believe, Abram takes the opportunity to ask his question to the source of his hope. Sometimes asking a hard question in prayer is the most faithful step a believer can take. Acknowledging our own limitations to God, while asking for His wisdom, is a much better approach than suffering in silence or ignorance. Verse 3 says, and Abram said, You have given me no children, so a servant in my household will be my heir. Abram opens his heartfelt concern. God has given him no children. If Abram died at that very moment, all that he owned would be passed on to one of his servants. He cannot help but wonder what God's promises could mean to a man who is aging and childless. Even in this, Abram manages to express faith in God. Those who ask hard questions of God are, in fact, acting in faith. Abram had not ceased to believe. If so, why speak to God, at all? God did not expect Abram and Sarai to figure out how to have an heir. All he asked was that they be available, so he could accomplish his purposes, in and through them. God was waiting for them not to do anything, so that he alone would receive the glory. Verse 4 says, "Then the word of the Lord came to him, This man will not be your heir, but a son who is your own flesh and blood will be your heir." God begins to reassure Abram that he still intends to keep his promises. Abram's heir will be his actual, literal son, his own flesh and blood. The fact that God has not yet given what he promised, does not mean he will not. Time does not empty God's promises of their power, even if waiting challenges our patience and sometimes, our faith. It's good to share our concerns with the Lord, even if what we say seems to indicate unbelief or impatience on our parts. God is never deaf to our questions, or unconcerned about our feelings. Verse 5 goes on to say, "He took him outside and said, Look up at the sky and count the stars, if indeed you can count them. Then he said to him, So shall your offspring be." God strengthened his promise further by giving Abram an object lesson. God commanded Abram to look up to the heavens and count the stars if he could. Of course, he couldn't. No one can, except God. The point of this object lesson was to show that Abram's descendants would become an innumerable people, a fact that history has verified. He would have more descendants than anyone could count. Abraham is considered the father of Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. Although this was an impressive object lesson, God didn't give any proof that would convince Abram that he would fulfill the promise. God simply expected Abram to trust his word. Demanding signs from God is always an indication of weak faith, or outright unbelief. Verse 6 says, "Abram believed the Lord, and he credited it to him as righteousness." Abram willingly received the reassurance of God's word and chose to continue to believe God. It's important to note here that this is not the beginning of Abram's faith. He had demonstrated faith when he moved from Haran to Canaan. We are not saved by making promises to God, we are saved by believing the promises of God. Since Abram trusted God completely, we are told that God credited Abram with righteousness. God declared him righteous because of his faith alone, not by any righteous works or deeds. This is often referred to as imputed righteousness. When we trust Jesus Christ, or put our faith in him, his righteousness is put on our account, and we stand righteous and forgiven before a holy God. Our final verse says, "The Lord appeared to Abram and said, To your offspring I will give this land." So he built an altar there to the Lord, who had appeared to him. God now gave attention to another promise previously made to Abram, that of an earthly inheritance. The Lord specified the dimensions of the promised land. It extended from the river of Egypt unto the great river, the river Euphrates. Then Abram built an altar there to the Lord, who had appeared to him. The call of Abram. Abram grew up in Ur of the Chaldees, an oasis of security, in the ancient world. However, the Lord called him to leave the security of his homeland and his father's house, and move toward a destination known only to God. Abram had to simply take the Lord at his word. He responded to the Lord's call and traveled first to Shechem and then to Bethel. God still sometimes calls his people to leave their comfort zones to follow him. The life of faith requires that we express our faith in obedience. True faith obeys God. The call of Abram. 1. The rewards of faith are far greater than the sacrifices it requires. Genesis 12:1-2. Our eternity in God's presence will be much more glorious and joyful than what we lose for Him. 2. God's chosen people, the Jews, hold a special place in His eternal plan. We cannot expect God's blessings if we mistreat them, Genesis 12:3. God expects us to accept His object of divine favor. 3. Hate should never prevent us from obeying God's commands, Genesis 12:4-5. All of us know that when the Lord commands it, we must obey regardless of age. 4. God's promises should be received with worship, Genesis 12:7. The faithfulness of God causes us to be confident in the promises and give Him praise and our service. 5. God declares to be our shield and great reward, so we have no reason to fear, Genesis 15:1. He will protect us from enemies, and give the victory over them. 6. Because He is our God, we can take our most troubling issues to Him, Genesis 15:2-3. Confident His promises will help us to have a tremendous amount of peace, knowing that He promised to take care of us. 7. Nothing can stop God's plan for our lives no matter how impossible things may seem, Genesis 15:4-5. God's plan is unchangeable and nothing and no one in this universe can stop that plan. 8. The true measure of our faith is whether we believe God's promises when circumstances seem to deny them, Genesis 15:6. God gave Noah a rainbow as a sign that He keeps His promises. He will be faithful to you. 9. God clearly reveals Himself and His plans to those who trust in Him, Genesis 15:7. God reveals His will to us by His word where we find statements which tell us what God's gracious will is. We are truly glad you spent time to learn this lesson with us. We hope you are blessed and may share these with somebody else. Thank you very much, have a great week, and God bless you always, dear brothers and sisters.